Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Mountain Minds Monday, a program of Tahoe Silicon Mountain. My name is Ellen Rayner, and I'll be your hostess for the evening. I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors. That's really what allows this to happen, and we do have a sponsor in the room. Thank you, Troy from MOBO, one of our silver sponsors. We also have a gold sponsor, Holland and Hart, and then we have quite a few community partners that make this happen, and you'll notice some new logos up there. So Nevada County Tech Connection on the lower left there. Truckee Tahoe Media, who is recording the event tonight, and I'm sorry I didn't give Dan a chance to introduce himself earlier. The Truckee Airport District has also been a sponsor for Tahoe Silicon Mountain. Lyft Workspace, where we hold some of our events. The Truckee Chamber of Commerce, via the Core Values Fund, has been a sponsor of Tahoe Silicon Mountain. And we'd really like to thank Tahoe Donner for hosting us this evening. You too can become a sponsor, and here's a link for where you can do that. Again, 100% volunteer organization, and so we do rely on your generous contributions. Thank you to the individual sponsors, and so there is the ability to sign up for a year-long sponsorship as an individual, and there are some perks that come along with that. So I'm going to move right on to the main event, and so I'm going to pass the microphone to Julia Arndt, who's going to talk to us about stress management.
Thank you, Ellen. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here tonight. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, thank you so much for Ellen and for the organizers, Dan and Dave, to host me and to organize everything. It's been very smooth and really a pleasure to work with you, so thank you. And I also want to acknowledge all of you that are here today, because I know that it's a Monday evening, 6 o'clock. We are, probably tired a little bit, and it's snowing outside, so thank you for coming to support Tahoe Silicon Mountain, to support me, and hopefully also to learn something new about peak performance and stress management tonight. So today and tonight, for the next 40 to 45 minutes, we're going to speak about harnessing the power of stress management. The topic and my company that I founded a year ago here in Truckee and Tahoe City, to be precise. And I want to talk a little bit about myself first, so you know who I am and what I'm doing. And first of all, a lot of people always ask me this question, so I'm going to answer it right away. Yes, I do have an accent. I'm not from the US. Originally, I am from Germany, and I grew up in Germany for the first 21 years of my life, and then I started to live abroad. I lived in 5 different countries over the last 12 years. I went for college, university, internships, and then eventually for my first job, and I never really made it back to Germany. And I worked for Google, actually, for 7.5 years. I started to work for them in Dublin in Ireland, and then I moved to Mountain View in Silicon Valley here in California, and that was 5 years ago. And so a lot of people ask me this as well, but obviously due to the proximity to Lake Tahoe, I finally made it up here as well for the very first time and completely fell in love with the place, and commuted for 3 years while working full-time in corporate in Silicon Valley, and that was a pretty stressful time. Hence, I was very curious to learn more about stress management and peak performance. I actually had my own experience with burnout a couple of years ago, and had a lot of time to understand where burnout actually comes from and why we're burning out. And so today, and actually a year ago, I created my own company called Blue Mountain Mindfulness, which is going to have a rebrand in a couple of weeks. It's going to move to Julia Arndt Coaching, because a lot of people think that with Blue Mountain Mindfulness I'm teaching meditation and yoga, which I don't. I teach peak performance tools and habits in order to help high achievers stay high achievers and grow in their career. Because what a lot of people have learned in their life is to work hard and be really disciplined, but what a lot of people unfortunately have not learned, and maybe less so here in Truckee, I hope, than in the Bay Area, is to take care of themselves and to recharge on a regular basis in order to be productive and focused at their job. And so I have made it my my own mission to help business professionals and forward-thinking organizations to rethink their lifestyle through peak performance methods and reduce stress. So over the last year that I have founded my own company, I have already taught over 1,500 people internationally, both in the US and in Europe, at companies like Google and Uber. And then I also work with other companies such as Facebook, Dropbox, I already said Uber, Headspace, McKinsey, all of the consulting companies, VC, so where we have high pressure, really fast moving environments. I help their employees to rethink their lifestyle. So that's a little bit about me. I always like to bring this up at the start because at the end we oftentimes don't have a lot of time to chat or exchange contact. So here's my contact. I also have a couple of business cards lying around here. I'm a speaker. I do this for a living. So I give talks and trainings at companies, and I also do one-to-one coaching, and I'm also building an online business. So if you're interested to learn more about me, I have a podcast since a year that's called Stress, Develop Your Stress Resilience. And I also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to learn more about that, make sure to check that out under my name, Julia Arndt. So let's jump into today's topic. And the first thing that I want to ask all of you, by a show of hands, is how many of you have experienced stress in the last 3 months or know someone that has been really stressed? Oh yeah, when we're thinking about the other people, we know that they're stressed, right? We don't really like to admit it to ourselves, but we all experience stress. And so we're going to talk a little bit about where stress comes from and what stress actually is. So I have prepared a little agenda for today, and I'm really curious to see how we're going to go along with this today, because it's a very mixed audience for me today. I usually have, stressed out corporate professionals in front of me, so it's a little bit easier to target the topic. So you see already you have a couple of papers and pens, because I want to go with you into a couple of exercises to help you rethink some of the things that you're doing today. So we're talking about, first of all, about the science of stress, where I'm going to tell you a little bit more about where stress comes from, what burnout is as well, because a lot of people don't know, and I think it's very important to know that. And I will also talk a little bit about how to increase your productivity. We do have a fair amount of people here that are working professionals, so I hope that I can give you a few different tools as well today on how you can better manage your time and why it is so important to recharge on a regular basis. Okay, so let's look at the science of stress. So first of all, let's look at what the definition is of stress. What is stress? And stress is just our body's reaction to any change that requires an adjustment or response. And I'm sure that all of you have felt what stress can do to you, right? We feel it on a physical level, we feel it on an emotional level, and we also feel it on a mental level. And it has a really profound effect on all of us. And what is really important is that stress is a normal part of life. Everybody experiences stress. It's not something that we should really see as negative, because stress has positive sides and negative sides, but we often associate it with something pretty negative. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But what is really important when it comes to stress and when it comes to making changes in your life is that we first of all have to create awareness around what is stressing us. Because if we don't know what is stressing us, we can't take action. So you have a piece of paper, and I want to ask you to just take a minute or two and think about what is currently stressing you. And I would like you to be as precise as possible, because you might be thinking, now my job is really stressing me, which that's fine, but it's not specific enough. So think about, is it the workload? Is it maybe your own time management? Is it a colleague that is really stressing you? It could also be outside of work. It could be a family member. It could be something else going on in your life. There's lots of transitions and transformations all the time that we're going through. So take a minute or two and think about, what are your current stressors? And if you need some more pens or papers, I think everybody has. Perfect. So we're going to ask a few in the room if they want to share with us maybe one or two things that are stressing them at the moment. Do we have any volunteers?
Hi, my name's Tom. So it's not so much work, although I got a new position and I'm having to learn a lot of new skills. So until those I feel secure with, I have a lot of concern on that. But the big concern is finding new relationships. Recently divorced and moved, and so that's a big stressor in my life.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing. We had a volunteer over here.
They're selling the house that we've been leasing for the last 18 months. So we want to buy a house in June, and so there's some stress about whether or not we're going to be able to find anything, and just what that process can be like, as you all can relate.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm raising funds for the Museum of Trekkie History, as well as for some restoration of some pieces of old railroad equipment that we have in a park at Paris. And we have certain time constraints that we have to do to raise these funds. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a stressful activity.
Okay.
I find dealing with my schedule very stressful. Right now, I'm very concerned that I won't be available to ski on Friday, which looks like a super powder day, and I'm trying to not get scheduled for that. It's really
That's
tearing me up.
Stressful. Yes.
So I find time management is the hardest thing for me, in the fact that I have so many interests and so many things I'm involved with, and I love them all. And I have the flexibility to deal with them, but I don't get to do as much time with each one of them as I'd like.
Yeah, that's a great one.
So I would say my biggest source of stress is to figure out where to focus more between family and company, considering that they're so far away from each other. So that basically is my main source of stress at this point.
Yeah, great. I think we can move on. Thank you so much for sharing. So you can see everybody has a kind of a stressor in their life, and it can range from relationships to work-life balance to time management. There's many different things that I think we haven't really learned in our life how to deal with, right? We're learning a lot of different things. We're learning how to code, or we are learning how to have graphic design skills. We're learning a lot of really cool skills, but we're not really learning peak performance tools. And in order to manage ourselves, manage other people, manage relationship stressors, and I created a method. It's called the peak performance method, and I'm currently writing a book about this as well. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do today in order to reduce some stress. Because at the end of the day, that's also something really important that I tell everyone, is that there's no stress-free life. There's always stress, and we're going to look at why that is. So I'm actually going to jump to this slide. So the stress response dates back to prehistoric times, where our bodies helped us to prevent us of any kind of danger and demands, right? It helped us recognize danger, react quickly, and it helped us survive. So the stress response that you're experiencing today is something that is really, really important for you to live. And I'm sure that all of you have heard of the fight or flight response. So what happens in your body when you're feeling stress? I want to talk about that a little bit as well, because I think it's really important to look at the physiology of why we're feeling stressed in the first place and how we can manage that. So first of all, there's of course a stress trigger. We heard about a few of them today, right? We heard about that we are worried about, finding a new partner, finding better work-life balance, time management, and having maybe too many projects that we're working on. So first of all, there's a stress trigger. So our brain processes that information, and that information usually happens with a thought. So we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of these thoughts are repetitive. 90%. And 7 out of these 10 thoughts are usually negative. Because we are trying to survive, right? So we're constantly looking for what do we need to do in order to survive, even though obviously nowadays it's not about our lives anymore. We're not fighting for our lives. We're just fighting for smaller things, but our body has the same response. So the brain processes the information, it activates the so-called sympathetic nervous system, and that is responsible for releasing different types of stress hormones in our body. For example, adrenaline, cortisol, you have heard of these, there's many other hormones that are released. And that is when you are actually feeling, for example, tense muscles, or you have an increased heart rate, or you have trouble breathing, or like it just feels a little bit heavier or more difficult to breathe. And that is when we are sensing stress, or the brain senses stress. And when we are more aware of what is stressing us, we will be more aware of what kind of impact it has on our body. But a lot of people are not really connected to their bodies nowadays. So they're honestly ignoring the signals, and they are not realizing what they're doing to themselves if they are in a constant cycle of stress. And we're looking at that other graph here in a second because it shows it really well. But why stress is becoming so important in our today's society is because it has a lot of impact on our physical and mental well-being. So here are a couple of numbers for you. 77% of people regularly experience physical symptoms that are caused by stress, and 3 out of 4 doctor visits today are stress related. So we might feel like I have a tight neck, or I have a stomach ache, or all these different things. And the reason why that is that when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, all of our main bodily functions, such as our immune system, our cardiovascular system, and our respiratory system are slowed down, because we are in the fight mode, right? We think we need to run away, or we need to fight somebody, so our body is going into this survival mode. And that causes a lot of problems if we're not getting out of that mode on a regular basis. And you see as well, $62 billion are lost in productivity every year as well, because people are burning out, they're having physical problems, mental problems, and that causes a lot of pressure on our society. So my mission really is to help people prevent burnout, because why not, right? We all have learned to be really productive, to be high achievers, to always give it our all, but we have to learn also to take care of ourselves. So the stress, and I have to kind of go back here. Oh, but actually I have one more slide that I want to show you first. This one here. So one thing that is really important and that I want you to take away from today's training is that we cannot differentiate between a perceived physical and psychological threat. And that is why when we're talking nowadays about notifications and about being on our phones and getting emails on a regular basis, our body doesn't know the difference if there's a saber-toothed tiger that is chasing us down the road, or if it's just an email that came in, but it causes thoughts that then activate the stress response or activate just that stress cycle. So it's really, really important to know that, because once you know that, you can take action. So I'm going to go back to this other slide because I want to show you this as well. So stress can be positive and negative. How's that? I just told you all about how negative stress is. But if you wouldn't experience the stress response, if there wouldn't be a natural adrenaline and cortisol increase that you experience usually in the mornings when you're getting up, you wouldn't be all sitting here in the room today. Okay? This is really, really important. If you don't have stress, your body is also not working correctly. The problem is too much stress. Just like anything in our lives, we need to find a balance between being productive, being focused, being active, and at the same time recharge, relax, and do things that will help us also get there. So you can see here on the slide, let's see if that pointer is working, not so well. Not so well, that's okay. If we are, for example, when we're looking at people in the corporate context or just in a company environment, or if you are employing people and they feel they're maybe a little bit disconnected, they're bored, they're unmotivated, it could actually have two reasons. It could be that they have not enough stress and they are not having enough responsibilities or things that excite them. So you can literally say that there's not enough adrenaline pumping through their bodies in order to keep them going. Or on the other side of the spectrum, you can see that if we are constantly on this high level of stress hormone release and we're not taking care of going back down this curve, then this can cause harm. And the problem with stress is that it's really sneaky and it's not going to happen overnight. It's something that is building up year after year, and I, for example, experienced my burnout after 3 years commuting between the Bay and Tahoe, working full time, having obviously a lot of work to do and being really busy, having late night meetings. And I didn't realize that I had a burnout and that I was putting my body under a lot of stress until my doctor diagnosed me with depression and anxiety. So it's something really important and something super serious that we should all be talking about. And I think, how many of you are working out on a regular basis? Show of hands. Awesome. Yeah, I think this is great, and this is, I think, something really particular for this society up here, because we all probably came here because we love the outdoors, and that's extremely important and something that hopefully helps you manage your stress a little bit better. Okay, so now that we know all of these things, the first thing that I always say is, okay, so now that we know this, is how can people always ask me about stress management tools, right? And yoga and meditation are two tools that you can use in order to manage stress, of course. Because when question?
Yeah, I was just going to.
One question.
Okay.
Yes.
I was just going to comment that you talked about the good cycle and going up in stress, and then it's important to come back down. And from what I see here, it's important not to come back down on the right side, but to come back down on the left side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Of this curve.
Yes. Yeah, and naturally our bodies will do that.
Okay.
For example, in the evenings, we are starting to produce melatonin, which is a natural hormone, in order to make us sleepy. But if we're constantly in front of our screens, or if we're looking at notifications late in the evening and we have another stress response because something is triggering us and we're worried about it, then it's going to be a lot harder for us to reduce our stress levels and get to sleep, for example. There's a lot of connections with that. And obviously this more monitors and shows the daily performance versus like from a day to a night performance. Yeah. Okay, so stress management tools. Yoga and meditation are two of them. But there's many, many others. And stress is really individual. It's just as we heard from a couple of different people what is stressing them right now, there's also lots of different tools that you can use in order to manage your stress. So I want to lead you into the next exercise. We had this slide, this exercise. I want you to take 2 minutes and think about, what do you like to do in order to recharge your batteries? And this could be anything. You see already a couple of ideas here. You can go for a walk, read a book, take a bath, go to the gym. Journaling is a really good one. This is something that I really love to do. Taking a nap, having a warm cup of tea. What do you like to do in order to recharge? Okay, so let's hear from a few folks in the room. What do you like to do to recharge?
Biking, skiing, or the gym. If I don't work out, I don't sleep. And then I'm also a landscape artist, so I like to paint and get away from the screens.
Great.
I like to meditate every morning for, 10 to 20 minutes, and now that it's winter, I'll say I look forward to my ski almost every Friday morning, my set time.
Nice.
I like to just spend time generally outdoors, so whether it's hiking or skiing or snowshoeing. In the summertime, it's spending time in the water, swimming, boating, and then I always like to start my day off just with having a nice warm cup of tea.
Nice.
When I started out, I had a very stressful job, and so my solution initially was to head to the bar after work to try to get down to an appropriate level and forget some of the things that occurred that day. So I soon developed some serious health problems with that routine, and I switched from going to the bar to going running. And I would always run against the clock every day. And it's hard to worry about things when the most important thing is catching your breath and breathing. So that took my mind off my work, and at the end of the run, I was very relaxed. Or whether I had a good run, if I had a bad day at work, whether I had a good run or a bad run, I had at least done something good for myself that day, and that helped settle me down.
Thanks for sharing it. Do we have anything else besides outdoor activities? Which they're all great, but I would love to hear some other ideas.
So I also like to listen to the YouTube speakers, spiritual,
just kind of motivational
philosophical
talks. And
and like Deepak Chopra is one of my favorites. He's brilliant.
I'll do it. I too like yoga and journaling, and then also randomly listening to comedy podcasts, like stand-up comedy.
Okay.
It's kind of just random.
Okay.
Reading before going to bed.
Nice.
And be it only 15 minutes and then fall asleep, but that's what I need.
I actually love to cook for people, so I'll end up wanting to have some friends over and just cooking up something that nobody has to think about, and it's just going to be a good meal.
Nice.
I enjoy doing creative crafts. I sew and quilt, but what I really enjoy doing is making pottery.
Great, thank you. One more, Kelly? You have a new one? Okay.
I echo a lot of what's been said, but I also love to just do anything manual labor since I'm in my computer for so much of my day. And so even just taking out the trash can be really therapeutic, or moving things around in the garage.
Yeah, same.
Again, shoveling, sure. Yeah, if I need to go shovel snow, I'm I'm in. It's great.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, those are all really great tools, and you see they're super diverse, and there's so many different things that you can do. It's up to you what you choose to do. And it's really important that you have kind of a list of short-term stress management tools, so things that you can do really quickly throughout the day, and then obviously some longer, going for a run, or depending on how much breaks you have during the day, that's important as well. So think about long-term and short-term stress management tools. Awesome. I have a challenge for you. I want you to think of me over the next week, every day, when you're doing something for yourself. Because really, it's something that we have forgot to do. I work with a lot of executives. I work with a lot of employees at awesome organizations that employ the best and the brightest, but they do not know how to take care of themselves. And it's a habit that they have to relearn. So do something for yourself every day for the next week, and see how you feel in the process of this. And I said it before, I want to talk about burnout just for 1 second, and then we're moving into the next topic. But I obviously, as having experienced burnout myself, it's really important for me to talk about this topic, because I was absolutely in the dark about what burnout was, and I think it's important we talk about this. I was always really active and healthy. I have a gym instructor certification, I have a 400-hour yoga teacher training certification, I have a diploma as a in sports psychology, so I was always really active and healthy. I knew that I have to take care of my body, I have to eat healthy in order to just feel good. But when things started to be really, really busy at work and stressful, and I also commuted 2,000 miles a month to come to Tahoe every weekend, I started to feel overwhelmed. And the first thing that we do when we're starting to feel overwhelmed and stressed is cut our own time, because that's the most easiest thing to do, right? If we have so many obligations and so many things on our calendar, we're taking our time away in order to help other people. And after 2 or 3 years in this cycle of commuting and working and having late night meetings and working during the weekends and all these different things, and not working out anymore on a regular basis, and maybe also not eating very healthy anymore on a regular basis, because I had a lot of coffee, I love chocolate, I had a lot of sweets, all these different things, started to build up slowly and creeped in. And one Sunday morning, I was actually in Tahoe. I had a bad fight with my partner because I always made him responsible for how I was feeling. And I realized that I wasn't really the person anymore that I wanted to be. And that was that signal or that moment where I was like, okay, something is kind of off here. I should be going to the doctor and check what's going on. So I went to the doctor in Truckee, and she gave me a health questionnaire. Something that I had never seen before. The questions were a little bit weird, but I answered them anyway. And most of the questions I answered with every day. Every day I have trouble falling asleep. Every day I have trouble focusing. Every day I feel on the edge with people. I feel stressed and I feel overwhelmed, and people can trigger me super easily. I had a lot of self-doubt about myself. And when she gave me the results, she told me I had depression and anxiety. And I was like, oh, interesting, okay. I didn't know what, I had heard whispers on the floor, and people talk about people with depression, but I always thought I will never be the person that will suffer from these medical diagnosis, I guess is the right thing to say. And I also had anxiety, which is depression and anxiety come kind of hand in hand together, because either you're very low and you have a lot of negative thoughts, and then in order to keep going and in order to perform and be productive at work, you're creating a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress in order to kind of just keep going. And when I was digging into burnout, and into what burnout was, I understood that depression and burnout is actually the same thing. The little difference that online publications and definitions make is that when you have a depression, and you can see the 2 different definitions here on the slide, when you are suffering from depression, you have negative thoughts and you feel very emotional and sad in all areas of your life. And burnout is more specifically to work. So if you're feeling it says here, physical and emotional strength or motivation is kind of exhausted, and we have prolonged stresses and frustrations. But I can tell you, if you're experiencing burnout at work, it will also affect all other areas of your life. Because when we're feeling unhappy and when we're feeling stressed out, it will go over into our relationship, into our friendships, and all these different things. So just something I wanted to mention. I think it's really important to know. We talk a lot about mental health. There's also still a lot of stigma around that. But at the end of the day, mental health is just an umbrella term for your emotional and psychological well-being. And we all have that. So we should talk about this more regularly and hear other people out as well that are suffering from these symptoms. Okay, on a lighter note, let's talk about productivity. So we heard a little bit about a couple of people in the room today that said that, you know, maybe they're taking on too many things, too many projects. Time management is often a big issue. So the first question I would like to ask the room is, show of hands, how many of you have a calendar that are putting things in? Perfect, wonderful, great. Then I'll lead you into the third exercise. I want you to think about, and this is something that you can do really on a weekly basis, every either Sunday evening or Monday morning before you're starting your week, I want you to start to get really, really clear on the top 2 or 3 priorities that you have during that week. What are things that you need to get done to feel obviously accomplished, but at the same time, maybe it's a client that you need to satisfy, something that you need to get done. Sometimes it's maybe even a personal project, but what are the 2 or 3 things? And you can think about it for this week. Today is Monday evening, so think about, maybe you haven't thought about this specific question today. What are 2 or 3 things this week that you need to get done in order to feel accomplished? So we had a question in the room about if making lists is a good or bad thing for stress. You can probably see it from both perspectives, right? Like making a list is probably really helpful to think about all of the things that are on your mind. And it's really helpful to write things down to get it off your mind. And then at the same time, if you see a list of 500 things to do, that can be really stressful. So there's not really a right or wrong answer. I think it depends a little bit on the personality that you are and how you work best. I love lists. You too, yeah. And I love journaling as well. I mentioned that earlier because I have a lot of thoughts on my mind all the time, and it's really helpful for me to get that down on paper, because once it leaves my mind and it's there, it feels like there's kind of something that's off my chest. And it also helps to organize your thoughts, because sometimes we feel like, oh my God, there are so many things I have to do. And then if you ask yourself this question, and you say, okay, I'm really honest with myself for this week, what are the 2 or 3 things? You know, there might be 10 things, but then you can prioritize that down to 2 or 3. Yeah. Okay, thanks for the question. Good question. Okay, I think everybody's looking up more or less. Yeah, cool. I'm not going to ask now what you wrote down, but this is a really effective exercise and something that we're not really doing anymore on a regular basis. And again, when we are talking about so many things to do and never enough time in the day to get all of the things done that we would like to do, think about the things that you really need to get done. And one of the reasons why we are feeling unaccomplished at the end of the day, or we're even coming home in the evening and we're opening our laptops again to work another hour or 2, is because we're not really clear on our priorities and the things that we need to do, and we don't feel accomplished as a result of that, because we have so many things going on that we just kind of keep on going and keep on going instead of setting ourselves up for success by setting really specific goals and then moving on from that. The next really good test that you can do as well when we are talking about these 2 or 3 things that you just wrote down, you all said you have a calendar. So one thing you can do in order to check if the priorities you just wrote down are reflected on your calendar is a really powerful thing. Because oftentimes we look at our calendars and we realize there's a lot of other things on the calendar that don't really match up with the list that we just wrote down. And it's something that once we have that and once we create that, it's really helpful. So calendar is one thing, and being really specific what we need to get done and then checking our calendar is also something that's called time blocking. Show of hands, who has heard of time blocking before? Most of you, perfect. It's really thinking about, I often work in corporate where people have back-to-back meetings all day long for 30 minutes at a time. And they run from one, and you might have the same experience. You run, like there's every 30 minutes you switch topics. Like every time there's something else, something new, and it takes a lot of your energy. So time blocking is really helpful in order to be really clear on what do you need to get done, who do you need to meet, but then also where do you put time for yourself in this, right? Where do you check emails? Don't check emails all day long. That's not very productive and time effective. Where do you spend time for yourself? Where do you work on projects that you need to get done? Where are you creating 3 hours or 4 hours of blocks of time where you don't get distracted by your phone, by notifications, by calls, by emails? So this is just an example of how that could look like. And so here are a few reminders for calendar and time management. You control your calendar. A lot of the times our calendar is controlling us a little bit, so you can take that power back and be like, okay, if the things that are reflected on my calendar are not really what I want to get done this week, then I need to start setting boundaries, which is another topic. I'm not going to get into that today. But setting boundaries, saying no, is also something that we haven't really learned in our lives, but that's very effective. The second thing is you don't have to color code every week, and the calendar doesn't have to be full. Like sometimes we feel pleased and satisfied when we see all of our calendar blocked out, and it's okay to have open times. It's okay to block times for yourself, and those are things that are really, really important to keep your own sanity and to keep your energy levels in check throughout the day. Because if you've had, for example, 3 hours of meetings in the morning or just lots of different things going on, you need to recharge. Like your stress levels are up there, and so the more and more we go down on the other side of the curve, it's going to be harder to focus because our bodies just don't have energy anymore to function. Okay, here's a guess for you. How long on average does it take to get back to a task after being interrupted?
Male or female?
Male or female was the question in the audience. We're talking about an average. So in between male and female. 23 minutes? 10 minutes? 20 minutes? Yeah. Very good. 23 minutes and 15 seconds. Very good. So there's lots of studies around when we're getting distracted, when we're working on a task and then all of a sudden our phone rings, or we're seeing our inbox tab and there's a little one notification. We're getting distracted, we're going over. It takes us 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to really being focused. So monotasking is a thing. Multitasking was in the early 20s, I think, the early 2000s, and now it's really in, and we have learned that monotasking is really the way to go. So it's really important to switch off notifications. I call it notification OCD because we are so addicted to checking our phones, checking our social media notifications, email notifications. And so when we do that, every time we are responding to something, it's somebody else is taking over instead of us taking over our own schedule. So besides, for example, me not having any social media notifications on my phone, they're all switched off. I also have no notifications for my email. And I think it's really important to put the phone completely away for an hour or two. When you're trying to be focused on a task, put the phone away. It's so easy to get distracted. The other thing I'm always saying is close your inbox tab. It's like the simplest thing you can do, and once it's closed, you're going to focus on that task. Even when your eyes wander a little bit because you're thinking about something, you're not jumping in because it's just something we have learned and a habit that we have created. Regular breaks, equally as important. Now you know why, and now you know what to do in your breaks, right? We talked about this, and you have now a list of the stress management tools that you like to do. And a lot of people always ask me, but how long is like the perfect time to take a break? So there's a lot of studies around that as well, of course. And the 10% most productive employees work on average 52 minutes, and then they take a 17-minute break, which is a pretty long time. And if we have some math whizzes here in the room, that adds up to 30% of breaks during the day. 30%. But those are the 10% most productive people. And when they take a 17-minute break, they're not on their phone. They like literally switch off and they do something to recharge. Going outside on a walk, taking some fresh air, natural daylight, really important. Just, completely distracting yourself with something different so your body and your mind can relax from the task that you just worked on is really, really important. So this is kind of the end of today's training. I hope that you took a couple of helpful things away. Here's a quick summary. Be clear on your top 3 projects every week and stick to the plan. Number 2, manage your calendar wisely and create time blocks. Number 3, focus on one task at a time. Number 4, don't forget to take regular breaks and do what recharges you. And number 5, really important, something I haven't mentioned yet, is practice, practice, practice. We have created a lot of unhealthy habits in our life, and that's okay. We all start somewhere, but the importance is to be aware of what we're doing wrong and then start to take action and build new tools, the peak performance tools that I call them, in order to be productive and at the same time have a nice balanced life. Have a work life that is thrilling and exciting and that is moving you forward, but also have a happy home life. And here are a couple of bonus tips, because I want to give you as much as I can. Drink lots of water, less coffee. We are having a high of coffee too much, unfortunately. Move once a day, prioritize sleep. Doesn't matter if we are all adults. It doesn't matter if maybe we have learned that adults don't go to bed before 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening. If you're tired at 8, if you're tired at 8:30, just go to bed and sleep. Sleep is one of the best things you can do in order to recharge and reset the nervous system that has had all of that cortisol build up over the day. Have 2 times 30-minute blocks per day to check emails. Otherwise, close your inbox tab and don't forget to enjoy the process. And this is just a quick reminder for you, because the greatest gap in life is between knowing and actually doing things. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. If you are interested in learning more, listening to the podcast, watching some videos, there's a couple of different channels that you can visit, lots of free content. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Any questions?
So I would like a little clarification on the 17-minute break after 52 minutes. Do they take a 17-minute break every 52 minutes?
Yes.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That would be lovely.
Yes. Judy?
So our daughter has incredible deadlines working with a startup, and she's working crazy hours, and she's bringing it home at work, and she doesn't see an end in sight. Any suggestions on this?
How much does she do for herself during the day?
Little.
Yeah.
Her dog.
Okay, good. Good that she has a dog. That's probably helpful. Learning peak performance habits, like learning to use your time more wisely and being more productive and focused at small bursts of time than just kind of keep on working and keep on working and keep on working. We have learned, and we think that if we think that if we work 12 hours per day, that we get more done, but we probably get the same amount done than if we have 7 or 8 hours. but we're not as focused, right? So we're getting easily distracted. We're looking at all of these different things. So that's always the first thing I recommend the people I work with is, usually I ask, okay, what did you do for yourself today? They usually say nothing. And then I say, do something for yourself and recharge more regularly. Set boundaries, look at, things like, look at what are really the priorities for this week. Communicate that really clearly with your stakeholders. Do you think you need to do this, or do they also tell you that you have to do this? There's a gap between those different things. There's a lot of tools and habits that can be created, but those 2 things or 3 things are usually the first big things that make a difference.
One thing that I did that helped in terms of taking breaks was I put my bookcase next to the motion detector controlling the lights so that it masked my movement from the motion detector. So it would time out from thinking no one's there, and I had to get up to turn on the lights again. And at that point, I might as well go for a short walk.
Walk around?
Yeah.
Nice, yeah. I have a watch that's reminding me as well. There's so much technology nowadays, right? And I'm sitting a lot as well. Sitting's very unhealthy. I think our doctor in the room can confirm that. And
staying still.
Yeah, staying still. And so, I have a watch, and I'm sitting on my computer, and if I sit, I think it reminds me after 45 minutes to move. So. Yeah.
Can you suggest any websites or books that might be useful for this?
Great question. There's a couple of different books that look at different things, and so I'll talk about a couple. That's why I'm writing a book, because I think there's not one book that kind of takes it all together. The books that I think are really helpful and that have helped me a lot, the first thing is more around habit building and performance. It's called High Performance Habits by Brandon Burchard. I always pronounce that incorrectly. Burchard. He talks more about high performance habits. So what can I create in the day in order to be more productive? He talks more about productivity. Stress related, there's one book that I really like. It's called Success Under Stress. It's written by a psychologist, Sharon Melnick. And she talks a lot about case studies of people coming in. She has a lot of exercises and tools in her book that you can go through while reading. The 2 books that have impacted me most, because that's one topic that we haven't talked about today, but that's also part of the peak performance method, is more deeper rooted limiting beliefs, mindset, because even if we learn how to apply stress management tools in acute situations, there's a reason of why we're triggered in the first place. And when we're not looking at these triggers, we can be really good at short-term stress management, but if the trigger is coming up all the time over and over and over again, that there's not really anything that we're doing at the root of things. And so I think it's really important to look at that as well. And a book, and I'm sure many of you know it, that I love, and that is my Bible, is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And also the 4 Agreements, because it talks a lot about mindfulness and awareness and things that we worry about and all of the thoughts that we have and our ego mindset. And I think it's really powerful to dive into that and create a new mindset. Yeah. And there's a book that's called Mindset as well. That's also really, really good. It's written by also a psychologist. I don't remember right now who it is, but Mindset, yeah.
Great. Well, will you be here for a few minutes
I
of
will be
questions
here if
afterwards?
there's any more questions.
Let's have one more round of applause for our speaker, Julia Arndt. And we look forward to seeing you back here next month, second Monday of the month for Mountain Minds Monday. Thank you for joining us.